Hi, how you doing? Um, I meant to actually do this video yesterday, but I got sidetracked with sorry, getting buzzed over here by bees and flies. Lovely. um, I was gonna do a video yesterday, and today was the first chance I had to actually get out here and rest my mind and actually do it. So here I am. The last couple days, the the word that's been coming up for me is overwhelmed. Um, Not necessarily in my own life, but just in general. It's a theme. Usually I come on here and do videos when themes come up for me, when I keep either thinking about a particular word or find myself having to talk about certain topics. Um, in any case, overwhelmed. What is that? It's not necessarily an emotion in and of itself. It's more of a culmination, if you will. It's not always in emotions either, but that's how it kind of presents, is we get emotionally overwhelmed. Usually because we're either carrying some baggage, residual thoughts that we hadn't processed, or emotions. And oftentimes it's usually when what was perceived as balanced on one day is now out of balance on another day. Whether that be our day-to-day routine or just things that we've learned to rely on or expect, and then all of a sudden it's uprooted or it's not that way anymore. So all of these things can trigger us emotionally, and sometimes we don't even know how to label those emotions. So we're sitting with a lot of feels, right? And we don't know how to parse it out. We don't know how to categorize it. So it just goes into that all-encompassing box of overwhelmed, because it just keeps piling and piling and piling on top of that. And we don't know what to do with it, because if we can't identify something, whether it be a problem or otherwise, how do you do anything with it? And this happens a lot. And it happens for a lot of people if we're not, it's my favorite word, being mindful, right? And we can't be mindful 24/7. That's why our brains like to fill in the gaps. It likes to jump to conclusions, create patterns, sometimes where they don't exist, and other times they do, but maybe we don't understand it. Whatever the case may be, our brain likes to do that. That's why it also hyperfocuses, or tends to, unless we override it, on the negative, on our lack, on our what I don't have versus what I want or need, what's gone wrong, or what could potentially go wrong. So it's so easy to fall into that lack mentality. Not to digress to an old topic, but as I've said, they're all connected. It is very easy to fall into that lack mentality because our brains are almost hardwired to do so, to help protect us. It fills in the gaps so that we don't have to overwhelm ourselves by overthinking all the time. And some people naturally do more than others. I've touched on that too. In any case, it fills in the gaps, but not always accurately. Okay? And that's not for me to decide what's accurate or the next person, because oftentimes what's accurate isn't a all or nothing type thing, with certain things, obviously. Um, but again, like I've talked about when I've tapped on belief systems, if I believe a particular way, well, what's right for me may be very different than for someone else. What was right for me at 20, or even, we'll say 15, we'll go way back. What was right for me when I was 15, as far as decisions that I may have made, isn't necessarily right for me now. Because we evolve as human beings, we grow when we allow ourselves to. Oftentimes it just happens organically. And then a lot of times we hold ourselves back, whether consciously or unconsciously. It's not always known unless we're paying attention, right? Consciously is, I see this, I'm making this conscious decision, I have metacognitions around this, I can think about the thoughts that I'm having and rationalize it, then yeah, that's a conscious decision. Sometimes we're quasi-conscious. So we have an idea that I have this particular behavioral pattern and now I'm engaging in it, but I'm going to ignore that because I'm not in a place right now to sit with it. Okay? And that's fine. Sometimes we need to distract in the moment. But like I've said in the past as well, it's always important to come back to it because it's not going to go away on its own. So if we don't deal with it, at some point, it's just going to add to that pile that overwhelms us. If we don't face something that we deep down feel we need to face, it's going to add to that. It's already taking away from our daily resources in the sense that we wake up hopefully refreshed after a good night's rest. Hopefully. It's not always the case, but we try, right? And if all of a sudden we hit the ground worrying, or we hit the ground distracting, or using skills so that we don't have to sit with something, we're already depleting our resources. Okay? We're already approaching the day almost from an emotionally vulnerable viewpoint, because we're already using skills to try and distract. We're already putting a certain amount of our brain power. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at 2 hummingbirds and they're adorable. Honestly, I don't mean to be distracted, but that blows my mind. I love hummingbirds. I love nature. And so far today I've counted 10 butterflies, a hawk, and now 3 hummingbirds. It's amazing. It's really cool. In any case. So if we're already distracted, on point, then it's hard to be in the moment, right? And life is experienced in the moment. A lot of times we miss the moment because we're too busy dwelling in the past or thinking about the future. Sometimes that, depending to the severity, that could be depression, anxiety. We all experience those things at some point on some level. It's just a human thing. How mental health ever became taboo is beyond me, because every single human being experiences it. It's why we take mental health days, right? It's called looking for balance and building that in. Sometimes we need to take a break from the daily grind. However, in any case, back to distraction, when we're too preoccupied either in the past or the future, how are things going to turn out, or what did I do wrong or right, or whatever the case may be. It's not always a negative thing. But in any case, when we're too distracted, we're not in the moment experiencing the here and now. Sorry. I gotta get a better setup here. In any case. And when we're not in the here and now, we're not putting energy towards our future. Because it's in the here and now that we make the choices and engage in the behaviors that push us forward. So if we're too busy sitting in the past, we're not moving forward and we become stuck, which goes back to other previous videos too. In any case, and that oftentimes leaves us more depleted, more overwhelmed, because then we start another day. No, I'm a failure. I was going to do this today, or I felt like I could do this, and then I ended up doing more of the same, or whatever the case may be. And sometimes the things that overwhelm us are like the pragmatic things that we do deal with from a day-to-day basis. Like maybe the car breaks down and now I have to figure out a ride to an appointment, or I have to now call and reschedule an appointment, or whatever the case may be. These things add up, especially the more people that are dependent on you. So if you have a large family and for whatever reason, whether they be little kids or they're older and just from whatever, maybe lack of boundaries or whatever, I don't know, I'm jumping here, but I'm just saying, when you've got older kids and if you are still the go-to person for everything in their lives, usually that indicates that there is some boundaries that need to be put in place. Not always, but this is a general type conversation. It's not specific. That's why I put in there that, these videos are to help, because not everyone necessarily needs therapy, if you will. Sorry, my neighbors are being loud. Not everyone necessarily needs to be in therapy for a specific problem, but it always helps when we can have conversations to help challenge the way we might look at things, because a lot of times we can figure it out for ourselves through conversation with other people, different perspectives. That's why it's so important to be able to communicate. In any case, obviously when someone, has something specific to work on, then you develop a treatment plan around that. I'm just trying to be very generalistic in what I cover and talk about without getting too intense, because everybody's a little different and all scenarios are going to be different. So again, take what makes sense for you. And if it doesn't, then it's not for you. That's okay. Maybe someday down the road it will be, because we all deal with these things. We've all been overwhelmed in our life. I don't know anyone except for maybe an infant, although they get overwhelmed too, and that's why they cry. They don't have communication skills outside of crying. These are things we develop and learn. We learn from our caregivers. So sometimes we have behavioral patterns that we learned from our environment that we know doesn't really work, but we've never learned a new way of doing it. And sometimes it's those behavioral patterns that create the problems for us in the first place. The things that overwhelm us aren't always problems, but those tend to be the things that negatively trigger us emotionally, or emotionally trigger us in a negative way, make us feel either lacking or sad or hurt or whatever, and those feelings that we don't usually like to sit in for too long. So we can be overwhelmed from emotions, usually the emotions we experience due to what we're dealing with. Could be a time management thing, it could be expectations, it could be disappointment, it could be regrets, could be all kinds of things. The key to getting ourselves out of feeling overwhelmed is to really break it down to what are all of the things that I'm thinking, feeling, what are the problems on my plate, what can I solve to get off my plate, and really just kind of parsing it out in the moment, right? So if there are pragmatic things you can do, you might not be able to help the fact that you, I don't know, maybe lost somebody or something. We can't always do something about that. But if, in addition to that, I have a flat tire and I have to find a ride, I can at least write down those things, make a list. Some people love lists. Some people it's anxiety ridden. It's different for everyone. I'm a list person, and usually by the time I determine to make a list, I've already done 2 or 3 things on the list, so I always add those, and I check them off. It's motivating. Oh, look, I've already done stuff. I'm already on the roll here, right? And it's a little cheating. It's a little mind hack for me. It makes me feel like, yeah, I'm already vested in this. I've got some stuff done. Easier to get on to the next thing. So for some people, they like the pragmatic approach of a list. Make a list. Whether it be emotions, what's causing those emotions. If I'm not ready to sit with the emotions, let's deal with the pragmatic problems that I can solve in the here and now. And the other thing too, is it your problem to solve? I always ask people, did you create the problem? If you didn't create the problem, then it's probably not yours to solve. And that indicates all right, maybe I'm taking on too much. Maybe that's not mine to take on, and I can give it back to the person that tried to make it my problem. It's one way. Sometimes we can recognize that that's not my problem. It's not my problem to solve, but I'm still willing to help because my cup is overflowing today and I have excess to give. Right? But if you find that you are already depleted, learn to say no. Unless, of course, it is your problem to solve. And in which case, how do I break this down? How do I problem solve it? And again, a lot of the things that overwhelm us aren't things that we can problem solve, right? If you think of loss or sadness and missing someone, we can't necessarily problem solve that unless there's something we can do about it. You know, I would personally would like to think that, you know, if someone was missing me so bad and they came in, I would never turn that away. I would like to think that everyone would be that way, you know? I just know me personally, I would never. Unless it's someone who is abusive or something like that. But that's not a concern in my book. For me, anyway. I can't speak for other people, but those are discernments you need to make in your life. Is this healthy for me? Does this put me at risk? And deal with it accordingly. So, with regards to feeling overwhelmed, the other thing to do so that you can get a good night's sleep and get refreshed as much as possible is don't wait till bedtime to think about your day or process your day. Okay? Don't wait to put your head on the pillow to start ruminating about how your day went. I always recommend addressing that, and depending on your lifestyle and what you have going on, you determine how much time you put towards that. But somewhere between dinner and at least an hour or two before you go to bed, before you do your bedtime routine, because that gives you a chance to kind of process your day. It doesn't mean you have to process your life, but that's a good opportunity to sit there and say, okay, is there anything that I need to challenge, reframe? Is there anything that I need to problem solve? Is there a conversation I need to have tomorrow so that I can start the day feeling a little less overwhelmed, knowing that I'm going to deal with it tomorrow? And then hold yourself accountable and do it. Unless obviously something huge happens that you can't, or that it doesn't make sense in the moment. But I think accountability has a lot to do with that, because sometimes we know there's things we have to do and we put it off and we just don't do it. And that leads to that overwhelming, because the next day we're already depleted thinking about what we didn't do yesterday or what we keep carrying with us. And that usually is what lends to that overwhelming, is when we carry a burden with us instead of either problem solving it, releasing it, looking at it differently, processing it somehow. Okay? And this is why things like grief take such a toll on us mentally, emotionally, physically. Because you can't problem solve when someone dies. They're gone, at least in our reality, as we knew them to exist. Our access to them may be denied, right? I don't know. It's different for everyone, but we can't problem solve that. That's not something, I can pick up the phone and call them and get them back in my life. It doesn't work like that. So that's overwhelming, because every day you're feeling that lack. And that's not a simple choice, like, I'm just not going to miss this person. So that's something we need to process. And the way we process that, as I tapped on a couple of videos ago, is that we need to sit with the emotions, but at the appropriate time and place. When do I have time alone that I can maybe take a ride to the water and just sit in my car and cry if that's what I need to do? not bottling it down, though. Emotions come and go, much like waves at the beach. The only time they stay with us is when we try and bottle them in out of an irrational fear that they could actually harm us. Usually we end up harming ourselves more by holding them in and letting them sit almost in a toxic way where it can impact our health. Because mind, body, spirit, it's all connected. Our thoughts, our emotions, our body, it all exists together. So when one gets toxic, it's going to impact the other two. It's kind of like putting a rotten apple in with 2 fresh apples. Eventually the rot's going to spill over. So it's important to allow yourself to be in the moment, right? To experience what you need to experience. Again, there are going to be times where it's not appropriate to experience emotion because you have to be really in the moment. In that case, then we distract. That's a skill, as long as we come back to it. We feel it for a reason. It's just not always the reasons we think they are. Because things like trauma and the results of that is usually depression, anxiety, but other things too can impact us. Absolutely. It's all connected. So it's quick. It's kind of like, it just can just start piling, much like emotions. So can other issues. If we don't deal with them in their, in the time frame meant for them to be dealt with. Sometimes it's not ever really too late. It's better late than never. But at the same time, if you can stay in the moment and attend to things, they won't pile up. And we all do it. We all do it. So it's recognizing that for yourself and what is it that is overwhelming me. Let me write it down. How do I feel? Sometimes free writing helps with that. You just sit down and let your hand do the writing and see what comes out of your head. I've had some realizations doing that in my life. Someone said to me, "Oh, are you okay?" Yeah, I feel great. And then I did some free writing and it was like, well, I was a little detached there because I wasn't doing great. Didn't realize it because I wasn't paying attention. So it's just paying attention, the mindfulness. Again, you can't do it all the time, but usually it's when we're feeling a certain kind of way, like when it's really strong for us, or we feel like I'm like frozen, I can't make a choice, or I'm like really angry and I'm lashing out at people, or I'm, whatever the case may be, when it comes to our attention, it's for a reason. And just remind yourself, this is an affirmation that really is helpful for me. Sometimes I just stop. Do a deep breath, right? In the nose, out the mouth, and say, this was taught to me in my first full-time job out of grad school. It was I am safe, I am calm, and I am exactly where I need to be. And just be. The problems will be there when you come back to them, but the calmer and more stable and balanced you are within yourself, the more adept you will be to be able to manage them. And just break them down, one thing at a time. Prioritize them on your list and start checking them off. They will eventually go away. Yeah, they'll eventually be replaced with other ones, and that's okay, that's life. But the more practice you get at staying in the moment and dealing with things as they come up, as you can, the less overwhelmed you're going to be and the more in balance you will be. All right, I hope that's helpful. Have a good day. It's beautiful out here. It's a nice breeze. And I've seen all kinds of other stuff while I'm talking to you. It's so cool. All right, have a good day. Talk soon. Bye.